Good evening, and I'm calling to order the Port Orchard City Council Work Study Session for May 19th. And pursuant to the governor's stay at home, stay safe order, the city will take actions on necessary and routine business. The city is prohibited from conducting meetings unless the meeting is not conducted in person and instead provides options for the public to attend through telephone, internet, or other means of remote access, and also provides the ability for persons attending the meeting not in person to hear each other at the same time. Therefore, we're conducting this meeting via Zoom. So welcome, everyone. Oops, and I got Mr. Haters joining us. I will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you wouldn't mind joining me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Boy, you got to work on that on Zoom. I don't know how, but
it's hard.
Lots of feedback there. All right, we have 4 items on our agenda tonight. I see Amos, and I see Ron Thomas and Karen Goon from Ron Thomas Architecture. And Ron, I think you're going to lead us through the latest update on the county courthouse project. So welcome, Ron.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to work right at the moment on sharing my screen, if that's all right. Give me just a moment. Okay, bear with me for just a second. Can everyone see that screen all right?
Mm-hmm.
Terrific. Okay, well, I'll begin by saying thank you for making this possible as we tried to outweigh the COVID restrictions and couldn't quite do that. So nice to join you via video conference. What I'm going to share with you is close to our 100% schematic design presentation. We're in the final few weeks of finalizing our cost estimate and packaging our materials. We'll be presenting to commissioners on June 3rd. And so you're seeing some of the final documents here. And for the sake of time this evening, at any time, feel free to stop me during the presentation if you have questions, you want me to slow down. But out of courtesy, again, for your time, I don't want to spend too much time on any one subject. So with that, I will walk us through here. Oh, bear with me. Okay, here we are. If you recall, the last time we presented to you, we're in what's called stage 1 services, and we're at the very end, at the end of May, finalizing all our package of materials. And then in the bigger picture, as we finish stage 1, again, the commissioners, county commissioners are dealing with the same things you are, trying to assess the impacts of COVID-19, whether it be on finances or on schedule. And so this schedule is a non-COVID impacted schedule. It shows us continuing on in the phase 0 parking solution, which I'll show you in a few moments, to do the new parking lot between Taylor and Smith out ahead of phase 1 construction being started. So it allows cars to move off of the current site and onto this new parking lot. And then throughout the rest of 2020 and into early 2021, we are completing the design for phase 1 new courthouse and the adaptive reuse of the existing courthouse. And then we start construction in mid 2021. Now, with that being said, we're just going to have to wait to see how this schedule slides. Does it slide by a matter of months? Does it slide by a year or more? We just don't know at this time. The county needs to assess the full impacts of the COVID-19 on finances. So master planning. It is designed, this new courthouse, in all of its phases to be one overall campus. And I know that's the way the city has set up the entire zoning for this area. This colorful map in front of you, that's showing you in a very big picture, phase 0 on the left there. That's all of the parking improvements. And we call it phase 0 because it happens before any of the other new construction. In the lower right, down at Sydney and Division, that is two things. If it can be afforded, we would improve the parking lot at that at that northeast corner, to regrade it, pave it, align Addis Street where it is going east of there. But it's yet to be determined if we can afford to do that. In phase 4, that site becomes a multi-level parking structure. And you can see the other phases. Phase 1 is the new courthouse addition plus all the site work. Phase 2 is largely just the addition to the courthouse. And then phase 3 and 4, those are the office building portions, the courthouse office portions, and that includes the site improvements for those buildings as well. This is a little further breakdown about what's happening in each phase. So phase 0 parking lot, you can see the surface parking lot between Taylor and Smith and all of its associated half-street improvements, all the landscape improvements, stormwater improvements. It shows the parking lot at the northeast corner of the site, the surface lot. And then this is showing phase 1 addition, the courtyard between the existing courthouse and phase 1. It's also showing some regrading of the area to the south where we're creating secure parking. Inmate release is changing as well. It's now, inmates are going to be released onto Division Street, away from the parking onto the west and south. Klein Street is going to be improved along the entire eastern edge of Klein Street. No more parking along that edge. It's all going to be dedicated to additional landscaping. This is providing a very large buffer between the residents that are to the west of Klein Street. So that building is over 40 feet back to the main body of the new courthouse. The next is showing phase 2 addition to the new courthouse, and then again phases 3, 4, the new parking structure. There will be covered connection between that parking structure and the main entry to the courthouse, which is aligned with the admin building entry. And then we'll also be seeing the significant improvements of Division Street. So note that there's a large public plaza now between the courthouse and the admin building, and a very large, basically roundabout. It's a big turnaround, large enough for transit to actually make their way around, drop people off. It provides front door drop off and very close ADA compliant parking. Now, the next slide is showing, I'm not going to go to the trouble of showing you all of the consultant's drawings. I've selected just a few of them this evening to point out some of the features. There's a high degree of depth that we've gone into in terms of the grading of this site, the stormwater detention that needs to be done, and the water that is coming off of these parking lots eventually is following the same drainage pattern that it does right now. However, we have to retain and treat a great deal of water before it goes into the existing conveyance system. This is showing a big overview of all 4 phases of landscape improvements. Significant amount of improvements are actually happening during phase 1. So all of that landscaping you see on Taylor Street, around the parking lot, the northeast corner of the site, and adjacent to the phase 1 courthouse, all of that is happening during the phase 0 and phase 1 work. Now, the adaptive reuse. The goal in the adaptive reuse is to improve the facilities for all of the departments that are remaining in the existing courthouse. So The Superior Court is the only department that is fully moving to the new courthouse. And so we're trying to expand sheriff, Office of Public Defense, and each of these departments you can see here on the first floor. But prior to that, we're improving the lobby experience for anyone who's been in the courthouse. You recall that there's only a few feet by the time you walk in that door to going through the detector, and there's only one. So in this expanded lobby, it's going to be twice the size. We're going to have multiple detectors that you can go through and a long lead line. And so it could probably hold on the order of 20 to 30 people inside the door. It's one of the big problems we have now. People are waiting out in the rain when it's very busy getting into the courthouse. Now, the next improvement for the public is a widening of the corridor that goes from that main lobby that you can see on the screen there in yellow all the way down south through the building, because this is the new connection to the new courthouse. So that entire corridor is being expanded, and then heading west, that corridor is also being straightened out. So from a building safety standpoint, we're cleaning up and clearing up the circulation into and both out of, in an emergency, out of this courtroom building. Another improvement is the sheriff is going to have a new lobby that's off of our main lobby. So everybody coming to the sheriff department goes through the detector coming into the lobby of the courthouse. And Office of Public Defense is also finally getting their space that they need to expand. They're very limited in staffing because of their limited square footage. Information services is expanding slightly on this level. And then this is the second level. Big move here is district court is coming up from the first floor up to the second floor and occupying largely the space that was Superior Court. And that includes the former Superior Court courtrooms are now becoming district court. District court lobby is coming upstairs. And again, some of the circulation through this floor is also being cleaned up. That main east-west corridor running left to right on yours is now a very straight, cleaned up corridor. County clerk is expanding slightly, and then prosecutor is actually getting what we hope we can afford is a circulation within their space to connect their first and second floors without going out into the public lobby. And then we have to take into account one of the many 7 to 8 expansions that happened over the years. These red lines showing on this drawing are some of the old walls. This has to be taken into account as we're laying out all of the new departments and the costs associated with breaking through some of those walls. And this is just one example of one department. This is showing the detail of the district courts. That's all in the lime green here. And then this is the programming sheets that we did over a year ago, projecting out 30 years into the future. And the areas in gray are not needed. They're things that are needed 30 years in the future, but the rest of it is needed in the next 10 years. And we're trying to accommodate growth at least over the next 10 years. That's everything shown in turquoise. We can accommodate in this adaptive reuse. Those that are in red, we can't quite meet the square footage shown there, but the space is provided. So the next thing I'll give you an overview on is the new courthouse. This is only phase 1. As you come from the right on your screen, that's the connector from the existing courthouse. You come on the north side, on the right side of the new courtroom building, and people circulate down the west side of the building to the courtrooms. Prior to that, you can see the large jury assembly room. So we take potential jurors in right at this. There's jury support and the large jury assembly room. When I go through these floor plans, the areas that are dashed in red, those are the areas that we've designed the building to accommodate. We just don't know if we can afford them yet. So if we can't, then jury assembly, the support spaces will be built, but jury assembly will actually happen in the large courtroom. And then when time comes, we hope that we can then afford to add the jury assembly room. We've designed it to accommodate that. Also on this floor is a non-jury hearing room and the secure hearing room. These are spaces that require a high degree of waiting room of guests that are coming to these courtrooms, and also high interaction of the in custody that are circulating to these. That's why they're on the first floor. Now, this building also has a mezzanine, and this area that's shown here in the jury assembly on this slide, this is showing the potential for after-hours use of the jury assembly and all the circulation space by the general public. So this would be an opportunity for the public use of this large space for functions, again, for the general public. And it'd have its own secure access that you can see there in the circle and the arrow pointing to it. And the area that's dashed in red, that's the area that would be secure. So they can't get into the rest of the building, but they can have use of this area down here. And then we have a mezzanine above the first floor. Primary purpose of this, you can see that it's a bridge. You can see it on the lower left. That's a bridge directly from the jail to a holding area and the secure elevators. From those elevators, in custody is able to circulate up through the courthouse without ever coming into contact with any public or judges or jurors until the actual courtroom. Significant feature. And so the first floor is actually 24 feet, which is 12 for the first floor space under the mezzanine and another 12 for the mezzanine itself, which is allowing in the upper right an opportunity for a cafe lounge for use by the public and of course all the folks who work in the building, but public can actually have a break time there. So you either walk up the stairs or use the elevators in the elevator core of the building. Again, circled in red. Even if we can't afford to build that space out, we're going to build the volume to accommodate that in the future. This is the second floor. As you come up the elevator in the upper right, you'll come out to the large public corridor facing west. And notice as you come out of the elevators, the public will have a grand view down of the water and the mountains beyond. And then as you come around, you'll have access to 3 courtrooms. There's public restrooms along here, and you'll notice at each of those courtrooms there is now attorney-client conference rooms, 2 of them for each courtroom. This is a feature that doesn't exist right now. And then the jury deliberation on the back side of all of those courtrooms. Shown in the ochre color, that's secure circulation. In the yellow or chiffon color, that is public circulation. Those 2 do not mix. And then the red, of course, is in custody. Again, all 3 of those circulation do not meet until they're in the courtroom. This is a significant risk reduction for this new courtroom. And then on the far right, those are a space that's future district judicial offices. This floor in the future would become largely used by district courts, and that's why their judges' offices are located in that space. But we're building the shell, if you will, allowing for that to be completed in the future. On the third level, same as the second, all the courtrooms. But here we now have at the right-hand side Superior Court admin offices. So they're literally only a floor below the Superior Court judges. Same pattern of circulation on this floor. And then on the third floor, 2 courtrooms on this floor. And here on the right-hand side, this is where we have the judicial offices of Superior Court. And note the red dash. At this time, again, for budget purposes, we're probably just going to shell the space. And so again, the volume of the building will be built. The supporting elevators and stairs and toilet rooms, they'll be built, but we will not be finishing off those courtrooms until the demand is needed years ahead in the future. So those are the floor plans. Now the exterior design of the building, again, meant to be a one large contiguous campus. In the right-hand image, you can see the massing of future phases. And so the entire Division Street and Klein Street will have a wonderful new facade to all of them. The building is purposely stepping up the hill. That's the lower diagram. The existing admin buildings step up the hill. So are these buildings stepping up the hill as we work our way up. This is just a few perspective views. If I'm looking from Klein Street and Division, I see the rendering on the left. It's basically just showing you solid wall versus glass wall. Or if I'm on Klein and Taylor, looking back, I'm seeing the large glass circulation, and there's large screens that help shade the sun from that circulation spline accessing all those courtrooms. Much of the facade of this building is taking into account the regional influences, even so much as trying to incorporate the influence of Native Americans. One of the things that was common amongst them is the weaving. You can see on the mats on the photo on the left. And so as we look at various materials for the exterior, this pattern of varying colors, of the lightness, of the weaving of colors together. And you can see that here, whether it be solids or screening. And largely we're looking at, again, if our budget can afford, terracotta. Okay, that's a manufactured material, but a beautiful, very long-lasting material. These are just some more perspective views from various angles of the building. And the thing to note here is the materials do change as we work our way around the building. So finally, when we get to the east side, that's the rendering on the right of your screen. That is turning into a less costly material, and it's facing the jail. So we don't need to be spending money quite as much as the north and west facades. These are the elevations of the building, showing the amount of glass versus solid. The heights of the building to the top of the parapet is roughly 84 feet. The lower floor is 24 feet. The next 3 floors are roughly 16 feet tall. And so this is within the city's heights for this. Now, the interior design space, these are some of the influences that judges, that other staff, that public reacted favorably to when shown these images of other facilities. These are some of the materials we're looking at. So it's meant to be a reflection of the Northwest, Pacific Northwest region that it is. So you see woods, you see some warmer colors, very durable materials, the terracotta flooring on the right, metal accents, so warm colors. And this next series of renderings, I'm actually going to walk you through the first floor of this building. In the upper left, that's an arrow showing what you're viewing. So we're standing at we're coming out of the existing courthouse, walking south, and I'm looking ahead in the public corridor, and that dashed lines there, that's showing opportunities for art or displays from various communities throughout the county. And the idea is this is a changing artscape that's a reflection of all the communities throughout your county. We have a very long wall along here, and I think it's a tremendous opportunity to share information about the county. As you begin to turn the corner, you're starting to see the large jury assembly. It's behind a movable wall. And on the right, that's the new courtyard between the two spaces. So it's meant to be a very calming space. And again, it's not for people to be in, it's just for people to view. Now I've turned the corner. I'm looking ahead to the glass that's looking out to Klein. On my left is the jury assembly. And there is an opportunity when we can afford to build the jury assembly to perhaps have a movable wall so that truly this space can connect to the entire circulation space that's accessing the jury assembly. So it can raise and fall to the needs of that room. Now I'm walking beyond, and the jury check-in is right past that large operable wall. And so jury members, potential jury members, they're going to have a very clean access, a very direct access to their jury assembly area. And now I'm looking beyond to that wood screen wall that's providing a public stair up to the cafe lounge on that mezzanine level. That's behind the railing, you can see 12 feet up. Now I'm standing on the cafe lounge looking back at the courtyard. Or I've come back downstairs. I'm now getting ready. I'm looking back at the corridor. The stairs to the mezzanine are on my left, the cafe lounge. And now I've turned around, and now I'm looking down the corridor that's accessing all of the courtrooms that are on the first floor, but also accessing, I can now see the main elevator bank and stairwell that's accessing all of the other floors. Those bridges you see, that's what allows people to come up the elevator and cross over to the cafe lounge area. Or in an emergency, the second bridge is taking people directly to the stairwell as well. Now, as I continue down this corridor, I can see large spaces opening up, people on the mezzanine. And then as I walk down the corridor to the courtrooms, the intent at this time is to have large panels of wood denoting the entrances to each of the courtrooms. And you can see the note on the upper right, clear story opportunities. So light comes through the exterior windows to the right and comes through these walls into the courtrooms. This is a significant feature in our courtrooms to allow for natural daylight. Now I'm at the opposite, the far end of the public corridor looking back. And again, you can see the wood paneling at the entrances to the courtrooms and the large daylighting of each of the courtrooms, and significant amount of public waiting in each of these corridors. Now, the interior design of the courtrooms, these are some of our influences that we're working with. One of the things we're trying to do is see if we can afford to do nice wood accents behind the judge and behind the jurors as well. And that's what that image is showing. And as we turn around in the courtroom from the jurors or judge's view, this is what they would look at. It's trying to mirror the use of the wood that you saw on the exterior public corridor. It's trying to mirror that on the inside. And here you can see the clear story windows letting light into that courtroom. There are many other options to study. Also, is there some type of a stonework or tile work on the back of the judge? That's being studied as well. Or if budget can't afford it, maybe it's just a wood wall behind the judge and sound absorbing to the left and the right. This is showing a full wall at the rear of the courtroom with a clear story continuous above. Now, what I'm showing you is just snippets from the work of all of the consultant team. It's large, and they've all had a chance to weigh in on the schematic design. So we are studying the proper structure. In this case, it's showing moment frames in the lower right. This is how we basically address seismic challenges on this building because we have a significant amount of circulation through this building. You've probably seen this in newer buildings, a lot of cross bracing. We can't do that here, so we're doing what's called moment frames. Allows for much better circulation. We have preliminarily designed the foundation of this building, and to remind you, the geotechnical report came back very good. We do not need pilings under this building, so we have large spread footings. And then it's going to be largely a steel structure. This is starting to call out the size of the steel columns and the beams. This is showing some of the major mechanical equipment up on the roof. This is just one of many concepts that we're studying. This has very large, that's the size of a school bus sitting up there on the roof. And this is more economical to operate, but we are studying other smaller package units as well for budgetary reasons. This is some of the early work on electrical, so identifying where the electrical rooms are, both main electrical and sub-electrical, all the equipment that needs to be in them to make sure we've sized that correctly, and its distribution throughout the entire facility. Now, one of the things we're beginning to work on, and information is being exchanged, I swear, on a weekly basis now with the city. This is just 2 pages of many pages. On the left column, it describes the Port Orchard Municipal Code that's applicable to this facility. The middle column, what are the required elements in that section of the code that will again apply to this courthouse? And on the right, it shows how we meet those requirements and or exceed the requirements. This is important because this document is the precursor to the development agreement. And we all have to make sure that we are in agreement with what's required and then what's going beyond what is required. And then these are just an example of a couple of the applications. We're in the process of completing development agreement application, and on the right, the SEPA environmental checklist application. This is all part of our land use application. And we're trying to get, basically, we're trying to get the clock started with that here pretty soon. Now, the next steps. So again, we're grateful that we're able to give you an update today, but we still have another public open house that we wanted to schedule. And so that's to be determined. It would be best to do this live and in person to get better participation. So we're going to remain available whenever we can get back together. We will then advertise and see if we can't get the public out, because we said we were going to give them an update after our first public open house, and we want to do that, give them an opportunity to ask questions, touch base on where the design is progressing. Then the second section there, master plan, we're continuing our coordination meeting with the city and their consultants. We have continued our work with Kitsap Transit there in support of the direction we're going in, and then the applications and the draft development agreement. So that work is underway. And then the phase 1 new courthouse, we are in the final days of finishing our schematic design cost estimate. We will be generating our summary and final report in the coming weeks. And I mentioned that we will be presenting to the commissioners on June 3rd. And then post phase 1. So what happens after phase 1? We have their stage 2 contract, and this is what I mentioned at the beginning. That's to be determined when our team begins work on stage 2. At this point, it's too early to tell the impacts financially on the county, other than to say we know it's significant. And so we are in the process of giving the county several options to consider going forward. Our surveyor in time may go ahead and pick up all the parcels that the county did not own back when we did the survey. And to give you a little update, there were 7 parcels the county wanted to acquire for our phase 0 parking. As of last Friday, 4 of the parcels have been purchased. The other 3 are in discussions, negotiations, various phases of negotiations. So the county did have that money already identified for those acquisitions, for assistance in moving, and so they are proceeding forward with that. And it's very important because that's what's teeing up the opportunity to ultimately do the construction on that phase 0 parking. When we do go forward, the design team will be proceeding with design development of the new courthouse and the adaptive reuse of the existing. And then there's a lot of land use development agreement coordination to happen in the weeks and months ahead. And we do realize that to go through the entire land use approval and approval of the development agreement is going to take many months. But that is very good work to be doing while the county assesses what to do about the COVID-19 impact. So we will be pressing forward with that and looking forward to our continued discussions with the city. So with that, I could leave the presentation up if you would like and just open the floor to questions.
We have questions for Ron?
Hi,
Ron,
I do.
this-
Okay. Well, how about Fred and then John?
Okay. Can you tell us a little more about the time frame for the traffic change for phase 3 when you plan to close off Klein at Division?
I wish I could tell you, since it's phase 3, it could be anywhere 10, 15 years out into the future. And phase 2, if you recall, is the extension of the courthouse. So optimistically, for it to happen in 5 to 10 years, that would be very aggressive. 10 to 15 possibly. So you can see phase 3, 10, 15 or more years out. So the circulation along Division will remain in its current form. And even when we build, this is getting not off topic, but my long range hope is that phases 3 and 4 can actually be combined. Once we tear down portions of the existing courthouse, it'd be my preference to tear down the entire courthouse. All those users that are in that courthouse would move temporarily to that new phase 2 that we just built. And then phase 3 and 4 will be built all at once, and that would allow us to basically close off division at that time, do that new rotary there, change the traffic patterns. But if phase 3 was to happen by itself, we would do improvements on the north side of phase 3, but we would not block off Division Street yet, not until phase 4.
I have a quick follow-up question. Do you know if you guys ever considered extending Division to Port Orchard Boulevard?
No. And I believe this was asked, if not by you, in the actual public meeting, somebody raised this up. And at this time, we're trying to direct future circulation up Sydney away from Klein. And so, yeah, I have to say we did not look at that.
Okay. Councilmember Clausen?
Yeah, I think you partially answered my question. I was just thinking as you were showing the pedestrian circulation in the new building, that a lot of folks would be coming from the existing courthouse into the new building versus, I think there's going to be a fair number of people coming from the new parking lot that's south of the new building and coming in that entrance. So I was trying to pay attention to your design of the entrance for pedestrian traffic or people from the parking lot to the south.
Yes.
How they would get into that corridor, I guess, and then go down to the elevator bank in that area.
Very good question, and one that this is a bit of a frustration, and we're limited site-wise where that parking can go. It's all the way on the south end of our site, so you literally have to walk down Klein Street, and we have a large expanded sidewalk and landscaping along, and then you come back to Division and in the main entry. This is fundamental to court security, and of course, trying to be realistic about the staffing. If you have multiple entrances, you just cut down your security, you bifurcated it, and then you've also increased the number of staff that are necessary. And so a decision was made to stay with one point of access. And so during phases 1, 2, perhaps 3, but finally in phase 4, with that new parking structure at the northeast corner of the site, now the majority of public that are coming, perhaps even secure parking for jurors, they will literally be parking right next to the new courthouse building. And so whether it's staff, there's a lot of other support parking required on this site for the jail and many other uses. So we see that shifting to Taylor Street and the public ultimately shifting to that new parking structure at the northeast corner.
So that parking structure at the northeast corner then would have access into the new courthouse?
Correct. It would be a covered exterior access, but connecting back to the courthouse. And because of topography in that location, we're looking at perhaps having a level of parking below street level, one at street level, and then another one second or third. So at worst case, this is only going to be 2 to 3 stories tall above Division and Sydney, the parking structure.
So Ron, on phase 0, what is the net gain in parking?
You know, that's a good question, and I don't know if Amos is unmuted, but I believe we're gaining about a little over 200 parking spaces on site. So we're obviously, some of our parking is simply replacing the parking that we lost when we built the new courthouse over the top of the parking to the south of the existing courthouse. But by adding over 400 spaces in that Taylor Street lot, we're gaining over 200 spaces to our count. And then that's much needed. And I'm glad you raised that because remember, this is a master plan for the entire campus. It's not just for the courthouse. So we do need to accommodate parking, which is, quite frankly, they're short right now for all the buildings that are on this county campus.
So Ron, I just wanted to jump in. It was roughly 430 at the phase 0 south parking, and then 96 at the northeast corner. If they
And
choose to
Amos,
go with that alternate.
Amos, the question was, how many net parking spaces do we end up with after phase 0 and phase 1? We are increasing the number of parking over what is there now, and I guess it was just a little over 200 spaces more than what we currently have on site.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think 800 was the design target,
Yep.
and then I think we're close to about 600 currently.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
Last questions for Ron before we move on to our next item?
Just
Okay.
a comment, it looks great and I'm excited for it.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Nice work, Ron. I really appreciate you
All
giving
right.
us this presentation.
Thanks for the opportunity, everyone. I'll
Yep.
get out of this, stop sharing, and then we'll excuse ourselves.
Okay. Thank
Thanks
you.
again.
All right. I think Bonnie's here. So I see Bonnie. Bonnie, you're second on our agenda. Are you going to share your screen or just talk to us this evening?
So I'll go ahead and share my screen with you. And for those of you that don't know who I am Bonnie Tufts. I'm with the Kitsap County Department of Human Services, the Block Grant Program. And I also have a coworker that will be presenting with me. So I'll let her introduce herself real quick and then we can get started.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Bauman from Kitsap County.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for providing us the opportunity to present on the update to the Consolidated Plan for the years 2021 through 2025. The Block Grant Program is a federal source of funds for housing, public services, community, and economic development for projects that principally benefit low-income individuals, families, and neighborhoods. The funds are determined annually by HUD and allocated to states and local jurisdictions, which are called entitlement communities. So this shows how the funds are allocated. Kitsap County qualified as an urban county in 1993 and began receiving CDBG funding. Then in 1994, the county qualified for and began receiving home investment partnership funds, which is an additional resource specifically for housing. Then in 1996, Kitsap County and the city of Bremerton formed a home consortium. The cities of Paulsbo, Port Orchard, and Bainbridge Island signed interlocal agreements for both CDBG and home funds with Kitsap County. The city of Bremerton is its own entitlement for CDBG funds. As the urban county, Kitsap County is the lead agency and contracts with HUD for the home funds, while the city of Bremerton retains decision-making authority for their portion of the home funds. As most of you are probably aware, last year the city of Port Orchard was notified of their qualification status as a CDBG entitlement city. Port Orchard deferred their status and remained part of the urban county for 2020 through 2022. Port Orchard will have the opportunity again in 2022 to determine how they want to proceed for 2023. And then HUD does determine annually the amount of each entitlement grant by a statutory formula. So this here shows our allocations over the last 10 years. The green color depicts the total home consortium, so that's the total for both the county and city of Bremerton. As you can see, from 2010 to 2012, we had drastic cuts in these programs. Home funds were cut by over 50% and CDBG was cut by about 32%. It did level off for several years and we have started to see some slight increases, although especially for home, we're not nearly back up where we once were. Our current home award is just over $738,000 and our current CDBG award is a little over $1 million.
So the consolidated plan is a HUD required plan for receiving CDBG and home funds. It's for a 5-year period, and it's a joint plan. So we plan along with the City of Bremerton, who is a CDBG entitlement and is in the home consortium. And the consolidated plan identifies housing and community development needs and develops a long-term strategy to address those needs for that 5-year period. So the key components of the consolidated plan are a needs assessment, a housing market analysis, the strategic plan, and the action plan. And the HUD provides us a template and actually provides us data for the needs assessment and the housing market analysis. It's primarily census data. They allow us to use other data if we have better local data. And this year, we're going to use data that our consultant, Echo Northwest, who prepared an affordable housing study for our whole county, release the plan, and there's a lot of good data that we'll be able to use in the consolidated plan around affordable housing. The strategic plan portion is the portion of the plan where we develop our local strategies and goals for how we're going to use the funding. And then the action plans are the annual plans that include the projects that are being funded on an annual basis. And it's actually our application to HUD for the funding each year. So the consolidated plan links several HUD required documents together. As I mentioned, the consolidated plan has the needs assessment and the market analysis. And that data is really what, along with consultations with organizations in the county and with citizen input, it's what drives the strategic plan. But along with that consolidated 5-year consolidated plan, we have what's called a citizen participation plan. And this is a plan that outlines how citizens can be involved in the process. It details our public hearings and written comment periods, as well as outlines how our grant recommendation committees are formed and how they work on an annual basis to select projects for the annual action plan. And as I mentioned, the annual action plan is the plan that goes to HUD. It serves as our application for funding, and it contains the projects that go through the annual grant application cycle process, and the recommendations that come forward from the grant recommendation committee and are ultimately approved by the board go into the annual action plan. The policy plan is a document that outlines a lot of the federal regulations that agencies need to be aware of when they're applying for funds. So each spring we put together the policy plan, and we're getting ready to release the policy plan for the 2021 funding cycle here in just a few weeks on June 1st. And it's really designed for for users of the grant funds, so they understand what's involved in both CDBG and home funds. And then the consolidated annual performance and evaluation report is an annual report that looks back at the prior year and evaluates how we've done in meeting the strategies that we included in the strategic plan. So the planning process for the consolidated plan starts with the needs assessment and market analysis and looking at that data, and then we also include community input. So meetings with the cities, we're going to be meeting with each one of the cities, consultations with agencies like the housing authorities or the homeless division of Kitsap County and other continuum of care, other agencies in the county. We did a survey in February and into March, just a broad survey to gauge what people see as the needs in the community. And then we have 2 public hearings, one in the spring, one in the fall, that have a public hearing and a written comment period on the plan. The strategic plan then is developed. That's really the phase that we're in right now. And then that, the whole entire consolidated plan, the needs assessment, market analysis, and strategic plan, along with the action plan, will go to HUD in the fall. We'll have a public hearing and written comment on it. It's due by November 15th, unless the federal budget is not in place by October 1st, in which case HUD waives that deadline and we wait until the federal budget's complete. So this is just a timeline showing the different phases that we're in this year as we develop the consolidated plan. So in the midst of all of this, we run the coordinated grant application cycle for the first year's funding. So it really means that we have to have priorities in place here soon so that we can open up the coordinated grant cycle and kind of know what kinds of applications and what the priorities are for the funding. We'll run through that during the summer, and then as I said, in the fall, in September, we will have a public hearing and a written comment period on the entire consolidated plan and the recommended projects for the year one action plan. So our current consolidated plan, which ends with the year 2020, which we're just now getting ready to write contracts for, this shows you the 5 years of investment from 2016 to 2020. Our current consolidated plan had these three broad or main priorities. Affordable housing was the primary focus of the plan. You can see with the top bullet point there that we allocated a little over $3 million in home funds and a little over $4 million in CDBG funds for affordable housing projects. We also had $333,000, a little over $333,000 for economic development projects. And then for services, for public services, we had $774,000 worth of projects through CDBG. The City of Bremerton identifies their own priorities, both for their share of home funds and for CDBG funds. And then they track their priorities for their funding sources. So the current consolidated plan goals, you can see on the left-hand side, these are the goals that we've been working on over the 5-year period. One of the challenges of doing this plan for a 5-year period of time is trying to determine what we think is going to happen over the 5-year period and what we think we're going to accomplish in terms of numbers of units, numbers of individuals assisted. And so we sit down and we look at the priorities, we look at the anticipated funding for the 5-year period, which again, that's also an estimate, and we make our best guess and set the plan priorities for the 5-year period. And then each year, so the year one project goals, those are the goals that come out of the action plan each year. So when projects are included in the action plan, there's a goal for how many units or how many people are going to be served. And over the 5-year period, we track those. So we track the actual accomplishments. And so you'll notice, for instance, under new rental units created, which is that top line, at the time we did this plan, we were not seeing a lot of development of new rental housing. We knew that we desperately needed it, but we thought realistically, given the current, the environment at the time, that maybe if we got 16 units, we'd be doing good. And so over the years, we had 8 units in year 2, and then lo and behold, this last year for 2020, we had several big projects come in, and they've been funded. They don't show as actual to date because they are still just getting started. The 8 units is actually under construction, but the remaining 82 units are still in the planning phases. And so ultimately, we will track all of the projects, get tracked and reported to HUD each year, and also to the county commissioners, so we can see how we're doing on these goals. So our new strategic plan priorities for this next 5-year period, affordable housing has continued to be, as I'm sure you're all aware, a much needed thing in the county. And so affordable housing is one of the strategic plan priorities. We also plan to continue to prioritize some CDBG money for economic development, and also the county is going to continue to have public service. HUD allows you to set aside some of your CDBG dollars for public service, and so we will continue to do so. We are going to add back in public facilities and infrastructure. We haven't done that for the last 5-year period, but we feel like that, you know, we're hearing from some of the nonprofits that there are some needs out there. We know that the city of Port Orchard might have some things that they're potentially interested in, and so CDBG can be used for different types of public facility and infrastructure projects. So we're including that as part of our priorities for this 5-year period.
So as Shannon mentioned, affordable housing continues to rise to the top, but there's a lot of challenges that we've seen even over the last 5-year period, and these aren't going to go away. There aren't a lot of agencies in our county that have the capacity to take on big projects like this, or if they start putting together one is the maximum they can do. We also don't have a lot of local funding. As you saw, our local home pot is not very large, and that means agencies need to look for other resources to bring in the big dollars. That would be through State Housing Trust Fund or tax credits. And to be competitive for tax credits, it means it needs to be a larger development. New development is very expensive. We also have a low supply of existing housing. So what we're not seeing is people moving from where they're currently living to free up some of those maybe smaller homes that might be more affordable because there aren't other homes for those people to move into. So that's created a lot of pressure on the housing market, both for rent and home prices. There's also a lot of folks that are in low wage employment and or on fixed incomes. So to provide housing for folks at that level, that means there needs to be vouchers available to keep it affordable for the people that are going to live there and make the project pencil. So as Shannon mentioned, we are getting ready to start our application cycle for 2021 funds, which, as she said, would be year 1 of the action plan. It always gets a little tricky running the year 1 grant cycle at the same time we're trying to finalize the consolidated plan. That's why we try and get the priorities identified early. But it's clear that housing is going to be a big priority again. So we will be issuing an RFP for home-funded housing projects. The RFP lets us target it more specifically and looking for new development and those types of things, or acquisition and rehab projects, trying to create more units. And then we issue a NOFA for CDBG projects. That allows it to be broad and flexible, which is what CDBG funding really is intended for. We utilize the coordinated grant application. You heard Shannon mention that. That's used together with the City of Bremerton for their CDBG and home funds, and the Kitsap County Housing and Homelessness funds. The applications all run on different cycles, but we utilize one application platform and try and streamline as many things as possible, utilizing common forms and those kinds of things to make it easier for applicants. We utilize one grant recommendation committee with the exception of City of Bremerton CDBG. They run a separate process for their allocation. And the grant recommendation committees are made up of appointments from all the elected officials. And those groups put together the funding recommendations that ultimately go to the Board of County Commissioners. And as Shannon said, the policy plan will be published June 1st We'll release the RFP and NOFA for viewing later in the month of June, and they will be posted July 2nd. So this shows you some of the eligibility for home funds. It's a very regulatory type of funding, but it's really used for housing projects. It can be anything from acquisition of existing, rehabilitation, new construction, or preservation of affordable housing. Projects must meet the goals and priorities in the Consolidated Plan. Some examples locally that you may be aware of: KCR's Jackson Village project, which was 8 units of affordable rental housing. Shelter America Group did a preservation of Conifer Ridge Senior Apartments. That one was just completed last year. And then we also fund some homebuyer projects, which include down payment assistance, both through Housing Kitsap for their self-help program and through Community Frameworks, who runs a countywide down payment program. CDBG, as I said, is very flexible as long as a project meets a national objective. There are 3 ways that a project can do that. The easiest way is to benefit low income, but a project can also meet the objective through a slum and blight or an urgent need. And urgent need it's like a federal disaster, and it's still pretty difficult to meet that one. So benefit to low income is where all of our projects have fallen. CDBG, although it's very flexible, cannot be used for new construction of housing. That's why the home component comes in. And some examples include the food banks, YMCA childcare, or Kitsap Community Resources Micro Enterprise BEST program. We also fund weatherization and single family rehabilitation for home buyers, or rental housing rehab on low-income apartment complexes. So I talked a little bit about the annual grant cycle. The RFP and NOFA will outline eligible applicants, how they can apply. It includes a schedule for the important dates, how they can receive technical assistance. We do require any new project to meet with staff to go over and make sure the project is eligible ahead of time. And then it includes the process for applying for the funds, review and evaluation, and the role of the grant recommendation committee. So I touched on those committees earlier. As you can see here, there are 8 members on each of the 2 committees, and they are appointed by the elected officials. And then there is an at-large position on each. So this shows you where you can access information on our website for the Consolidated Plan and the application schedule. And we will continually post information to our website once we get the RFP and NOFA ready, and it will have links to the online application platform. We encourage people to sign up for Gov Delivery, and that's down there at the bottom, the kitsap.gov.com, so that when we post things to our website, you can get notification. And here's our staff contacts. And as many of you, we are mostly available by email right now. That's the easiest way to get a hold of us, and then we can set up phone calls. So with that, we are open for questions.
Let me unmute myself. So I have just one question, if I could, Bonnie. The infrastructure, public infrastructure, what would be what type of project are we looking for there? Is it sewer and water? Is it pedestrian improvements? What would perform well? What type of an application would perform well in that bucket of dollars?
Both of those would be eligible. So as I mentioned, it needs to meet a national objective. So the benefit to low-income people for a project like that is demonstrating that it's in a census area that qualifies as a low-income area. So we run some calculations on that, and you guys, I'm sure, know which areas those would be, but we can certainly
most
look
of
into
them.
it. Yeah.
Other than
Quite a
McCormick.
So,
how big
but
are
both
those
of those are, and the city of Bremerton with their CDBG funds has done like curb cuts for sidewalks and different types of infrastructure projects. So they are eligible.
How big is a typical bucket of dollars for a project?
I would say our typical applications for the capital side of CDBG, I would guess range anywhere maybe from $50,000 up to $250,000. Shannon, is that about what you would see annually?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Okay, and the application deadlines for this year, is it fast approaching or already been by us?
Nope, the application will open on July 2nd. So make sure that you have somebody watching our website for when that's posted, and then we can set up a meeting. It will open on July 2nd, closing on July 30th. And our application schedule is already on our website.
Okay.
Yeah, we're asking agencies to contact us before the application opens, just to have a pre-application meeting, just to make sure that your project's is eligible, and then answer any questions about filling out the application.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, I'm not hearing any. I appreciate your presentation this evening, and I know we've got lots of needs. Is whether or not we can put the resources to an application and managing another project is the challenge all the time.
Mayor, I do have a question, if I might.
Go ahead, Mr. Cross.
Two questions. One, in regards to the city now qualified for CDBG, what exactly does that mean? And secondly, your graph that shows the revenue, at least as of 2020, do you have any projections of what that might look like for 2021 or beyond?
Is that question for me then? So we became aware of it, and of that we could run our own program and be eligible ourselves. We just realized that it would take staff resources we don't have. So
I appreciate that fact of it. I just was wondering, what does that mean? City of Bremerton, for example, they run their own and they're allocated a certain amount of dollars. And I'm just curious what that might mean for the city of Port Orchard.
So Bonnie, do you have a guess for me?
So if Port Orchard decides to become their own entitlement at the next 3-year cycle, so during the year of 2022 for 2023, the HUD would include the city when they run formulas, and I'm not sure what the city's allocation amount would be. We were trying to estimate that, and I don't know if we came up with an amount, but there's several factors that HUD uses when they run the formula, but population is part of it. So your formula amount would be smaller than the city of Bremerton's. What that means right now, though, is you are still part of the urban county. So your interlocal is in place with us. So if the city decides to apply for a project, they would submit an application just like any other applicant. We did keep in mind the idea from discussions with your mayor that infrastructure and those types of projects might be consideration. So that's why we wanted to make sure we included those back in the plan this year so that they would be eligible, and also working towards where the city might go 3 years from now. The city would have to develop its own strategic plan as it moved forward.
If the city were to do that, would that result in a net increase in the funds that come to Kitsap County, or would it be just a redistribution of what's allocated?
So the home funding, my guess is the home funding would be about the same as it is now. So we would, that wouldn't change because you would remain part of the home consortium because you would not qualify for home funds on your own. CDBG funds, the county's CDBG funds may go down because the city's population would be pulled out when the formula is run. Yeah.
So it would be just a reallocation of funds, not a
Correct.
net increase to the community. All right.
Correct.
Thank you.
And one thing to keep in mind with the way the formula works is that it is population, it's partly population based. That's why it would potentially affect how much would come to Kitsap County. But how much Congress allocates to HUD to allocate for CDBG varies from year to year. And so if in a given year there's an increase in CDBG, then they run the formula and distribute it across the nation to all the entitlements. So if there's additional entitlement cities, it can sometimes mean, you're spreading it out more. But if there's an increase in funding, sometimes there can be, it can offset that a little bit and so that's why from year to year, we never are really sure.
Right, but there's no net benefit to the city breaking off and doing it on its own. That it's just a redistribution of whatever amount Congress allocates to the CDBG funds. So,
Councilmember Clausen, when the mayor and I studied this issue, when we made the decision to defer a year or two ago, we looked at the overhead of running our own program compared to the amount of money that would come direct to us. And it seemed that the economies of scale just don't exist for running such a small CDBG program. I think at the time, the reason we recommended deferring was that it made more sense to work under the county because they had a system in place for all the steps of administering the program.
yeah, I don't dispute that. And I mainly was interested to see if there would be a net benefit to the community at large, not just Port Orchard, but all of the communities, Kitsap and everyone, if we were to break it off. But I'm not advocating that we break it off. There's a lot of work involved in it.
Okay. Other questions for Bonnie? Okay. Appreciate you coming this evening, and hopefully we can get an application put together and take advantage of your program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to our third item as soon as Bonnie here gives me. We got our screen back, and I'm probably not going to share this. This was in your guys' packet, and I see Ryan Hader's here with us this evening too to answer questions. But we talked about this yesterday. Our communications plan. It's in your packet. Yesterday at Economic Development, and I'll hit some highlights. Then I'll let Ryan talk for a few minutes, and then you guys can answer some questions. So this plan, I recognize, is ambitious. We'll be lucky to get all of it done, but I didn't want to sell us short. I mean, even if we don't tackle some of it till next year, at least we've got a plan and a roadmap on what we want to accomplish. And we got a communications goal of becoming a model for small town success through two-way communication, driven by an approachable city government and active, engaged citizens who play a vital role in city decision-making. In that mission statement, to build rapport with the city council staff and Port Orchard residents, there was a recommendation to add Port Orchard residents and businesses and to our final plan. And so that came from the Economic Development Committee yesterday to formulate and complete the most successful, the most meaningful and fiscally responsible projects leading to a vibrant community with a shared vision. It is a source of pride for our current residents and attraction for future citizens. This plan has internal and external components to it. Internal components, before I get to that, on the second page, and where it says "be human," we felt that I think this was Councilmember Kachardi's idea, and it's a good one, to being change that to being approachable, for that header there. And then to those forms of communication, our internal communications, we'd like to do a survey with our employees. I think it's timely with our salary survey that we're doing. We're doing some of that work already. This past year, I did an all-staff meeting, and to continue that and do that in the first quarter every year, create an idea box sometime in the fourth quarter. And sometime this fall, we'd like to create an intranet, which is an internal web page for timesheets, communication, employee benefits, and things of that nature. In the external communications box, we want to do a survey to the community, improve the visuals on the website. Currently, our website, Ryan pointed out here recently, the council meeting packets, when we post those once a week, it takes several clicks for a citizen to get to that. That ought to be right there on the front page. I know sometimes I forget to download it myself, and I'm navigating a few clicks myself to get it and download it to run the meeting. So I think that would be helpful. I'd like to do a newsletter that's, instead of a typed newsletter, I know the directors will love this because they usually write the content for that newsletter. And instead, I know enough about the projects that we're doing to talk about them conversationally. So Ryan and I are talking about doing a video newsletter and putting that out there on a quarterly basis, and it might be viewed a little more often. I'm just not going to dive too deep. I mean, on the second to the last page, we gave a smattering of projects, significant projects that we will probably do, that we would definitely do messaging on. And then Ryan has been a great help here in this last few weeks with a few different messages, and we're working on one right now that we'll probably get out tomorrow, related to the governor offering us Kitsap County a path to move forward faster, with 10 other counties that are out there, or 9 other counties for a group of 10 of us. So Ryan, do you have anything you want to share about this plan?
Yeah, just talk about what I've experienced over the last month of just observing all the communications channels, that there's a lot happening within the city that I was really an outsider until the last month, where I thought I was active, but I really don't know that much that's going on. And there's so many really relevant, positive stories that never see daylight just by me casually listening in on conversations. So hopefully we can pull more of those communications out so our citizens can be aware of what's happening inside. I also want to emphasize two-way communication, where we're really all on the same team, and we need to make it easy for us to share news, but also to receive news and respond accordingly. When you create a communication strategy like this, it does create more work because more people are going to be contacting you. So that's something we also have to consider moving forward. How are we going to handle those calls? Because we don't have bigger budgets, we don't have more staff, we're just going to have more people wanting more information. But that's something we can handle just through efficiencies and some different strategies we're going to put into place. Also, the mayor talked about the key stories for the year. That's something that I'd like all you to consider too, on what do you think is important that we can plan ahead for now, knowing it's coming down the pipe. And I do have a city email address, which I believe all you have. It's rhader@cityofportorchard.us, and please feel free to reach out to me anytime with questions and concerns.
Okay, so comments about the plan or questions for Ryan? Jay, go ahead. You're muted though.
Mayor and Ryan, I really liked the fact that in here was a time frame for what I'll call a tabletop exercise when you're going to take it through the crisis communications. I thought that's a nice little step and headed in the right direction. So thank you.
Well, yeah, and crisis communications, from my perspective, from a communications field, is a little bit different than legal, where in the legal world, you dig in. And in my world, you actually communicate and come to full resolve. And so it's something that I think we can start practicing in the city as well.
Other questions or comments? Okay, I'm just excited to have Ryan aboard and helping us with our communication. We've got a lot going on that we want to share, and I think this is an opportunity for us to do a better job in that area. So, thank you for supporting us and funding this this endeavor. Okay, wonderful. We're going to move on to our last item of business tonight is types of nuisances, bees, and stinging insects. And we've been waiting all night for this, Mr. Bond.
Thank you. I'll be quick. The city council received a complaint about a month ago from a resident who lived next to someone who was keeping bees. And apparently that his neighbor had somewhere around 8 nests on an 8,000 square foot lot. So Mr. Price, our code enforcement officer, has been researching bee issues and how to regulate those. And in working with our city attorney, we've come up with a two-pronged approach to this. It requires changes to our nuisance code and changes to our land use code. The ordinance that is before you tonight is a change to the nuisance code, and it's a very minor change, but it basically adds some language dealing with keeping of hives, and it doesn't say that keeping bees is a nuisance. It's only when they exhibit objectionable behavior that interferes with the use of property, or if you have abandoned hives or deceased bees, those are things that can be considered a nuisance. And so this would give Doug at least some initial tools for dealing with the problem. Fortunately, he has been able to talk to the beekeeper who was causing this particular issue, and I understand that has mostly been resolved at this point in time, but it's still good to add these tools to the toolbox. And in concert with this, we'll be taking some land use regulations related to the agricultural use of beekeeping forward to the Planning Commission for review. But what we'd like to do is at least get this nuisance ordinance passed by bringing it to City Council for a vote next week. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those questions now.
Mr. Clausen?
I'm sorry.
Then I'll call you next. Go ahead, Mr. Clausen.
Yeah, I just, in reading this thing, this doesn't prohibit someone in the city for keeping a beehive. It just, if it becomes a nuisance, then they have to deal with it. Am I correct in reading that?
That's correct.
Mr.
Thank
Roseman?
you.
Yeah, Nick, I just had a quick question. What was the resolution with this issue?
I believe the beekeeper has reduced the number of beehives on his property, and so I think that and in keeping with the ordinance that we're going to be bringing forward, it's going to limit you to, I believe, 2 hives for smaller properties. I haven't seen the full draft of the ordinance yet. I believe it's in my inbox right now, but it's basically going to limit you to a certain number of beehives per property as a zoning issue, and that's the action that this individual took, was to reduce the hives.
Other questions for Mr. Bond on bees?
Nice to hear that a phone call can still work.
Yes. All right. With that, I don't have anything else to share this evening. Nothing else on our agenda. Anything for the good of the order? I thought this was going to be a longer night than this. So, Mr. Rosepepe, you have something you want to share?
No, I have a question, Mayor. Just where are we standing right now with opening in Kitsap? There was a rumor running around that Kitsap was moving into phase 2, and I was going, that was news.
Governor announced today a process that we can follow. And we've got an emergency health board meeting next week to, I think it's going to be Wednesday, to evaluate that application and probably vote on whether we're going to move it forward. The wild card we got, that was great news. The wild card we got today was, if you didn't read the Kitsap Sun you read today, there's an employee from the veterans home that tested positive, and we might have to wait a period of time. So we want the staff working on this application and helping us with our data, but when these having to do the contact tracing is an all hands on deck exercise with their limited staff. So guess what they're doing right now is exactly that with that outbreak, or hopefully not an outbreak. It's a single case, and we might have to wait a week or more to, you know, hopefully not two, which then brings us back to where the governor was potentially going to already open things back up for phase two. So, you know, here at City Hall, we're working hard we've ordered some standalone touchless hand sanitizers we put sneeze guards just about everywhere, and we're evaluating workspaces because we need to be able to be socially distanced in our workspace now too. And so fortunately, those are all eligible uses for the CARES Act funding that we have. We still don't have complete guidelines on those, and I know Noah's, I think, got a conference call tomorrow on that. Those guidelines keep information keeps coming to us. So, Councilmember Cacciardi?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm pretty sure that they've already made the decision that while they want to, you know, do all the paperwork and kind of get the process moving, that they will not push that forward till at least May 28th because of the issue at Retzel. So it doesn't appear that it'll even be requested prior to May 28th as of late today.
Yeah, that was Dr. Turner's quote in the paper today. So, yep. So disappointing, but it happened. So we have to deal with it. So other questions of me? Okay, with that, our meeting's adjourned. We'll see you next Tuesday night here on the same Zoom channel.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.